back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. This week for UFC Vegas 55, we're headlined by top 5 women's bantamweights. We got Holm taking on Ketlen Vieira. And in the co-main event at welterweight for what should be a really good fight, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Michel Pereira. Again, man, this week's only scheduled for 11 fights. Hoping we have no mishaps on the scale on Friday, lose any fights, because I think there's some fights on here that's going to deliver. Great podcast last week, man. We both finished in the green. We cashed both Underdogs and Petrosky and VV. Both best bets, Chuk and Tatsura. You hit Petrosky round 1 for your prop. I think I was on track to hit Rakic by decision, But man, 6-0, like I said, on our straight picks. Both of us finished in the green. And go ahead, Mr. 100% ROI. Show them last week's success, man.
Yeah, big week for us for sure. Looking at your card, your biggest bet of the night was Verna Jandiroba, 3 units at minus 150, and she looked like a minus 300, dude. No, she really delivered. For your parlay, Maximov was the buster. You were not alone there. I know a lot of people were on Maximov. And then the Chukagian wins by decision, plus 110. Almost an auto bet at this point. You know that's her win condition and a great plus money hit. You ended up plus 1.28 units on the night. And like you said, it's hard to complain whenever you're in the green. Looking at mine, I did have an awesome week. We started off with Vivian Arujau and Manuel Torres kind of dominating their opponents, and you got a good price tag on them too. The Petrosky underdog pick was probably my favorite one. It kind of set the tone for the night at plus 330. And then the one that I did miss was the Tyra inside the distance, and damn, man.
So close.
30-26 just couldn't get the finish. And overall, good night, plus 10.04 units, and looking to keep this ball rolling into next week. In our main event, we have Holm versus Ketlen Vieira. And if I'm being completely honest, this is not one of my favorite main event matchups, but it is a pretty cut and dry breakdown. If this does take place on the feet, I think the most obvious path to victory is a Holm decision. She's got the much better footwork to keep the fight at her kicking range, and we've seen Ketlen follow her opponents around the cage without the ability to cut the cage off before. If it goes into the grappling, I do think that Vieira could give Holly some trouble. She's averaging a little over 1.5 takedowns per fight at a 50% accuracy. And for what it's worth, she does have some decorated background in grappling. She's a BJJ black belt, has some judo and national wrestling experience in her back pocket, and she's slowly developing into a well-rounded fighter at only 30 years old. If she does manage to close that distance and get Holly in the clinch, she's still got a big old girl to try and get into the mat. Holly has a 76% takedown defense and is extremely strong herself. I just can't figure out why Holly seems to be the parlay piece of the week. Styles make fights, and I understand that. But objectively speaking, we have a 40-year-old striker who's been off for a year and a half, tending to back-to-back knee injuries that have forced her to pull from her last 2 previous matchups. For me, that might literally be the worst injury that I could think of for somebody who's so dependent on her movement and footwork to win a fight like Holly is. This seems like a tricky spot, but I'm more than comfortable passing here. Officially, I'll choose Holly to get the dub over 5 rounds, but I won't be wasting a cent of my money on her.
So officially, man, we're going to come out on the exact same side here. I got Holly Holm. Think she takes this one by decision. Former title holder, former title challenger, and she has been in the octagon with the best that women's MMA has to offer. She's known for dethroning dethroning Ronda Rousey. Then, you look after that, we're talking about 5 rounds with Cyborg, time in the cage with Amanda Nunes, 5 rounds with Valentina, and she was up on prime Miesha Tate before getting choked out in the 5th round. And I think that was a much better Miesha Tate than Ketlen Vieira just fought last time out as well. You talked about her, big girl, good size for the division, knows how to use that range, very dynamic kickboxer. But she's also developed that grappling game over time, and you've seen it in her last 2, especially the Irina Aldana fight. She went out there with the wrestling heavy game plan and went to work. But the big elephant in the room, you're right, man. She's going to be 41 years old this year. You talked about the injuries and stuff that I didn't really have in my notes, but that's something else you don't necessarily like to see. But while Ketlen's younger, I think if Holly Holm comes in here and her, in her normal traditional form that we've seen Holly Holm in, I think she's the better striker than Ketlen. Ketlen has a negative striking differential. We see her actually get her lights put out by Irina Aldana. So Holly's going to have the openings. And then you brought up the statistics. I think Ketlen's takedown accuracy is 46, 47%, And then the 76 takedown percent rate of Holly Holm makes me think that maybe these takedowns aren't going to come as easy as Ketlen's going to want them to, and she's going to get stuck chasing Holly Holm across the outside, running into the jab, running into the teep kicks, things like that. Outside of her age, I do lean Holly quite a bit, but yeah, there are some red flags that want to keep me off. Outside of the head kick from Nunes, man, she's never been knocked out. You know, she, like I said, went 5 rounds to Cyborg, so Ketlen is a big girl, but I don't necessarily see her finishing Holly Holm either. I think I've said bantamweight girls go the distance more than any other weight class in the whole UFC. I think that's the case here. I'm gonna lean Holly Holm volume down the stretch. Mm-hmm. In our co-main event in the evening, we got Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Michel Pereira. And, I've had the fortune of doing all these co-main events this year. And looking back, this is probably the absolute best one that we've had on a fight night so far. Ponzinibbio, for the longest time, man, was on that 7-fight win streak. Had just finished Neil Magny, was getting him in line for a massive fight with former title challenger, or former title holder Robbie Lawler. And then the health scare happened and things. And since then, I think I can say with 100% certainty, I don't think he carries the same frame, the same muscle mass in the octagon and things like he used to. And now he's 1-2 since returning, losing to guys that I think he probably would have walked over during that 7-fight win streak. He's getting into all-out wars with guys like Baeza. And Baeza's been knocked out in his last 2. So that win, the one win you have since returning, doesn't even hold that much weight anymore.
Not aging well.
Then you just lose to Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal had the DUI and the weapon charge right before his fight with you. His head was not in the right space. He was out drinking during training camp and things, and you still couldn't even go in there and beat him. So, man, I really do think at like 35, 36 years old or whatever he is, Ponzinibbio, he's just not the same anymore, man, and he tends to get in these brawls with type of guys, and I don't know if you want to get in a brawl with Michel Pereira because dude is a massive, massive welterweight, packs a ton of power, and I do think you find that kill shot on him. But you always have that Tristan Connolly performance and the Diego Sanchez performance in the back of your head. And you don't ever really want to back Michel Pereira either, man. So I don't know how I really want to play this fight. I'm probably just going to pass. But a few years back, Pons plus 100, I would have been over all day, man. But right now, I think the pick's gonna be Michel. I think he presents a bunch of problems.
I think you nailed it on the head. Literally, my first note is if this was 2017, 2018 Pons, this would be the easiest pick on the card. But it's not. This 35-year-old Pons, you talked about the muscle mass not really being the same. For somebody whose game is determined on pressure and striking, he isn't one of the biggest welterweights in the division, and that does most of the time hurt him. He's getting touched up with a lot of people, and he's just made a career off of being able to pressure somebody so much that he melts them. I think he does have that same pressure and pace, but I just think that the division has more or less caught up with him. You talked about the durability kind of possibly being an issue after the Jing Liang fight. But Michel's one of these guys who is supreme athleticism, has turned himself into this legitimate welterweight contender, and has focused more on using that elite explosion for Superman punches and well-timed knees, and less on backflips and dancing before the fight. I think in the back of my mind, I still want to say that Pons could break him over 3 rounds with the pressure. But I think Michel Pereira is that guy who will earn the respect of Pons after he lands that one flush shot. And over 3 rounds, I do think that he'll eventually find that shot that'll change the momentum of the fight. Pons hasn't eaten those shots as well, and you talked about his wins after his the blood infection, not really aging well. So that being said, I'll probably lay off this fight, but I do expect Michel to kind of prove that he is this newer wave of welterweights and kind of put Pons to an end.
I'm with you. One thing that we really didn't bring up is because we think he can land the kill shot. Michel Pereira, outside of that round 1 knockout of, I think, Danny Roberts or whatever in his debut, he's landed a takedown on every single one of his UFC opponents as well. So the guy's not just a crazy showman striker. He's got some grappling skills, and he's not afraid to take you down and mix up the game as well. And so, yeah, I think we're going to be on the same side here in the co-main event as well with Michel Pereira.
For my fight of the night pick, I'm going to be going with Uros Medic versus Omar Morales. I usually try and stay away from anything Alaskan FC, but I think that this is a decent spot here. Medic, he makes for an incredible hammer when he fights, undeniable power in those early rounds, which we've seen throughout his professional career. But now he's coming off of his first career loss to Jalen Turner, and it seems like all the bookies and the general public have lost their faith in him, man. In my head, it was just an awful matchup for him against Jalen Turner. Uros is 6'1", usually has the size advantage in the octagon, and now he's looking across the cage at a 6'3" Jalen Turner, and he was probably out of his comfort zone right off the bat in that fight. He ended up losing by rear naked choke, but it was the stand-up and the body work of Turner that actually made him crumble. In this matchup, he has someone in Morales who was coming up a weight class to lightweight. Now, this is Morales' original weight class when he entered the UFC, so it isn't too crazy, but it does lead me to believe that Uros will have the size advantage that he's used to. I think this fight also takes place on the feet for as long as it lasts. I've seen Morales willing to play the counter game and stay on his back foot against strikers, like the Shane Young fight is the one that specifically comes to mind. If Morales does stay on his back foot, I think he's going to get wrecked by Uros, and Uros doesn't know anything else but push forward. So this is the first time we've ever seen Uros as a dog in the UFC. I expect him to prove that he shouldn't be. But I wouldn't hold a lot of weight to it. Again, we're talking about an Alaskan FC fighter with 8 professional fights.
5-minute gas tank.
Yeah, he could get himself into some trouble. So there might actually be some props that are better to play for this fight, whether it's Medic early or Morales late, But I don't think this sees the judges' scorecards.
I'm with you on not seeing the scorecards. I think you're probably going to get a pretty decent, price to maybe even parlay that as well, because Omar Morales tends to be a decision machine lately in the UFC, but his counterpart there in Uros Medic has not seen a 7th minute ever in the cage, And so I think you actually might get a little playable line, something that, can boost up a parlay. We both super happy for Uros to make his way into the UFC. I know we were happy, loved his Contender Series performance, came in here, dust Alon Cruz. He trains out of, Kings MMA, so he's got Vittori, he's got DeRouche always to help him with his grappling. But we always kind of knew, real inexperience, no gas tank, Alaskan FC. You can't go too heavy on this guy, and it was just going to be a matter of time before he did suffer that defeat. But I think a first loss for a young fighter like that at a good gym can actually do wonders for you. I think he's going to learn a whole lot from it, and he's got a much easier task in front of him here with Omar. He was a lightweight, but he definitely can make the featherweight limit. He just did it 3 times in a row. Uros will have a big size advantage, and I don't really see the same skill set from Omar. He's nowhere near as talented on the feet, and when has he ever pushed a grappling heavy pace, wrestled? Where's his submission threat? He doesn't have any, man. So I do think he gets stuck striking with Uros, and I think he probably gets put away. You were talking about the Shane Young fight. I look at the Giga Chikadze fight here, man. If you can't push the pressure on him and get him down and work that kind of game against him, I don't think you're going to be able to do that against Medic anyway. I think Medic round 1 probably goes out here and dusts it, man. For my fight of the night, I'm going to choose Chidi and Njokuani taking on Dusko Todorovic. Man, I think we see this quite oftentimes. Chidi comes in as the underdog to Marc-Andre Barrios, knocks him out in 16 seconds, and now he's steamed by the public to like a minus 200 favorite in the next one. And we see that all the time, in my opinion. It's just a complete overreaction by the public. And I don't necessarily know. I think you've lost so much value that I don't know if I can get in on Chidi here. He's 33 years old, and he's getting a real late jump to the UFC, but he has fought at a decently high level. The guys, prior to the UFC, wins over Alan Jouban, Max Griffin, Andre Fialho, all these guys having success in the UFC. And when you look at who he's lost to, Korshov, he's a 2-time title challenger in Bellator. John Salter, very good black belt on the mat, also a title challenger. And then Carvajal was the middleweight champ from 2015 to 2018 in Bellator. So for a guy who's set on the outsides at a lower organization, he's fought some competition that I think can get him wins in the UFC. Great size for the division, man. He's 6'3", 80-inch reach, and he throws a ton of feints with that back leg. And he's patient. You don't really necessarily see him put himself in a lot of danger on the feet. He'll tear up the lead leg, happy to flow from both stances. He's a problem for guys if you can't take him down. And while Dusko has, all of the defensive holes in the world that I think Chidi can capitalize on, I could see Dusko strapping on that singlet Saturday like he did against Daquan Townsend and wrestle him, man. He's also got a TKO over Michel Pereira, so he packs some power in his hands, and when I look at who he has beaten since coming into the UFC, though, Daquan Townsend and Maki Pitolo, they're both cut at this point, So I don't know if I can get a true read of how good Dusko is at this point. And then I look at the defensive holes. I see him caught by Punahele. Chidi is definitely the better striker here, and if he can keep it on the feet, I think he's going to probably land that shot to put it away. I might have laid minus 125 if I got that bet online opener on Chidi, but man, at minus 200, minus 210, it's a complete pass for me now, even though I think that's the way I'm going to still lean.
Yeah, we're seeing this fight similar. I think if it was minus 125, Chidi's going to be standing and banging with this guy who is hittable. Dusko absorbs 5 strikes per minute. I doubt that his chin's going to hold up if he's taking the power shots from Chidi. That being said, Chidi's shown in the past that he can get completely out-grappled, and I do think that if Dusko was smart about it, that's going to be his game plan going into this. I can't imagine standing across from 6'3" Chidi that's something that you want to stand and bang with. So if he's smart, he should try and wrestle, but I could see this one definitely being a fight of the night and possibly getting that knockout of the night performance bonus. For my fighter to watch, I'm going to be going with Polyana Viana. Not just for the looks. I think that she's got to prove to me that she can win outside this first round, man. She was on two fights ago. She was on the brink of getting cut by the UFC with 3 back-to-back losses: JJ Aldridge, Hannah Cyphers, and Veronica Macedo. None of those girls are anything to write home about, so it wasn't looking very good. And then she pulls off 2 back-to-back first-round arm bars. You look down at her career, and that's been her win condition from the very jump of her professional career. So for me, she's my fighter to watch because I want her to prove something outside of a first-round armbar finish. That's just not a win condition I like to bank on, especially when we're talking about 115-pound girls. She's facing a girl who I think that she has extreme size advantages over, a girl that's willing to go into her wheelhouse by taking it to the ground and ending up in her guard. So it's all on Polyana to one. I want to see her get a finish, but I'd like to see her outside of that first round and see if she's developed her game at all. She's approaching 29 years old, and this is really the point in her career that she needs to be making some significant improvements.
Yeah, man, a lot of love for her this week. So a good fighter to keep your eye on. She's hot as hell as well. Yeah. So, but you're right. When you see all those arm bars, it does tend to worry you a little bit because it does mean that she finds herself on her back a lot. And when you come up against a good grappler who could potentially mind their P's and Q's, who is a black belt like Tabitha Ricci, that armbar might not be as much of a threat. So, interesting one on Saturday that I am ready to see as well. Fighter to watch for me, I'm going to go Jalton Almeida, man, at minus 700. Fighter to watch for numerous reasons. Absolutely looked incredible on the Contender Series. Looked even more incredible against Danilo Marquez. Marquez is not a good fighter, but Marquez has a damn good ground game, and for him to just mop through the floor with him, run through him, Almeida's got a bright future. But at that price tag of minus 700, the dude's, anytime he's seen a third round, he's lost before. He weighed in at 203 pounds the past 2 times he's weighed in for light heavyweight, and now he's going on to take a guy who's, I promise, will weigh 266 pounds on the scale on Saturday. I know he's still going to be so much faster than a man in terms of striking. I think he's going to be able to get around the hips and get that takedown. But it is, when you see minus 700 on a guy going up to heavyweight, in the past, guys moving up weight classes, it doesn't really go well for him. And Parker Porter, he kind of has had like a career turnaround since 2018. He's only lost to Chris Daukaus on short notice, and then I think like a DQ. But the 3-fight win streak he's put together, man, those guys elite. I guess they're all like bottom level. I think it was an absolute thank you for taking the Chris Daukaus fight. It's like, here's the worst 3 heavyweights we got on the roster. Heavyweights that get finished by everybody. Josh Parisen just got ran through by Dontel Mays, crucifixed and finished by a Golden Gloves boxer. Chase Sherman ran through by Jake Collier, Alan Bodeau, he has no durability, and everybody was on Parker Porter to go out there and finish him. And not being able to put these low-level guys away, I don't know if he's going to be able to put Almeida away. And then you got to go back to 2011 when you see Parker Porter submitted for the last time. It was by a UFC vet and Gabriel Gonzaga. The fight really takes place on the feet for a whole lot. the moment it hit the ground, he styles on Parker, man. It's straight to mount, straight to the arm triangle, and I think Jalton's got a ground game, man, that if he does take it down, I think we're going to see Parker submitted on Saturday. So Jalton Almeida inside the distance minus 190 is probably how I'll go.
Yeah, man. So I feel you. I feel you. Looking at Jalton, I think that he is like, I don't know, peak body that you could possibly ask for in the UFC. I do worry about him kind of coming up to this weight class. He'll probably be, like you said, 50, 60-pound weight disadvantage. Yeah. So I doubt that he's going to be able to go in there and just power bomb like he has in his last fights. I don't think that he's going to just be able to use his strength to get the fight to the mat, but I have seen in his past fights his ability to kind of work in trips and other types of takedowns that eventually when it does get to the mat, Parker Porter's way out of his element and Almeida should get the finish. For my underdog of the week, I'm actually going with Sam Page Hughes here against Elise Reed. Hughes, now training at Fortis MMA full-time, has Jinyu Frey and Macy Chason as main training partners. And just saw an interview with John Hyun Ko directly after her last fight that ideally she would have had a full camp for her next fight, and it'd be late summer, early fall. 3.5 weeks later, she finds herself here against Elise Reed. I think that, that gives me some reserves, but I also think that Hughes was unsure that she would get re-signed, so she was willing to take on any opportunity here. And for what it's worth, I think it's a solid matchup for her. Originally, I went into tape study wanting to bet Reed, and for the most part, I liked what I saw from her, especially on the feet. She's more than willing to let her hands go, has some crisp techniques to follow, but it's her ability to give up takedowns that I just cannot look past. When I saw the Sarge fight, I was able to cut her some slack. Sarge is, a 500 fighter, but she's strong and she is able to, up a weight class. She is able to implement that game plan. But it's the Corey McKenna fight that really hurt my confidence, man. It's insane how good Reed can be doing on her feet against McKenna, who I don't hold very high in the first place, and then is immediately able to find herself on her back getting dominated. For me, I think Sam Hughes is just a little bit better of a striker than McKenna. As good of a wrestler as McKenna, and she's 4 inches bigger than McKenna. She's going to have to eat a few shots like Sam Page does in all of her fights, but eventually I think that she's going to end up putting that pressure on her and getting her down a few times, which will ultimately win her a decision here, possibly a split decision. So although I'm not going to be hitting it super hard, I do think that this is another spot that Hughes could find herself with a win in the UFC.
Yeah, man. I mean, I honestly don't hate it because you're right. I feel like the last fight with Elise Reed and Corey McKenna was everything Corey McKenna did wrong. Mm-hmm. It's like when she wanted that takedown, she got it. And if she would have just pressed forward earlier in the rounds, she would have taken that fight. And I've seen Sam Page take some absolute shots from Estela Nunez. Yeah, I could see her walking through some punches and getting this girl down and like you said, riding out some minutes and taking and stealing a decision here. I'll go ahead and add to the comical underdog section here. This kind of started out as a joke, man, but give me Alan Amedowski at plus 170 against Ugly Man Joe. Ugly Man Joseph Holmes last time out against, a very bottom level middleweight, Jamie Pickett. Looked horrible. Gas tank was awful. I was a firm believer that I did not think he was UFC level. And now he's a minus 200 favorite. To anybody on the roster, I don't know if I can get behind it. I don't think there's value there. How about that? Mm-hmm. When you look at the two people Amedowski knocked out in Bellator prior to signing with the UFC, they're 6'2" and they're 6'3", so he's been in there with taller middleweights before. He knows how to get the pressure on. He knows how to back him up against the cage, and he knows how to let his wild hooks go. And man, the cage of the Apex, it's a whole lot smaller, and Joe's going to find himself with his back on against the fence more than he's used to. You look at Amedowski's social media, man, like he'll talk about, train with the best and trust the process. He's over there with Hamzat and Gus at All-Star Sweden, man, getting to work directly in with Hamzat, and I know he is expecting a better version of himself this time around 3 years later than the one that left us getting knocked out by John Phillips. I don't necessarily know if you're going to see a tracked bet for Alan Amedowski for me, but you will never catch me putting Joseph Holmes minus 200 anywhere on my betting card, man. Parlay, anything.
For our prop to watch section, I'll be taking Michel Pereira by KO at plus 350. That line just dropped, and I think that that's the overwhelming majority of his win condition. For me, with Ponzinibbio's style of fighting, he's somebody who wins minutes by putting on the pressure, putting you on your back foot. And Pereira here, I think he's going to have to tag him at least one good time to earn the respect of Ponzinibbio. And over 15 minutes, I think with his elite athleticism that he will end up finding that flying knee or the Superman punch to put him out. So even though I'm leaning Pereira, instead of laying minus 122 on him, I'm more than comfortable on laying plus 350 on his KO prop because I do see that being the most likely path to victory for him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really do think he can land that kill shot on Ponzinibbio. But you brought up a good point. As Ponzinibbio is the one with the forward pressure, he's going to be putting Michel on the back foot. And so in terms of the judges, Ponzinibbio might be the one that's looking like he's doing most of the work there, but until he absolutely gets nuked by a flying knee or something, right. So yeah, plus 350, I think there's a ton of value there. For me, I'm going to go Tabitha Ricci decision at plus 180 or better. I really hope she doesn't just flat out burn my ticket by subbing Pollyanna, who seems to be a round one fighter, or style on Pollyanna and then end up getting armbarred. From guard. Pollyanna's 6 of her 8 submission wins are by armbar from guard. And so, it is a bit worrisome because that's where Tabitha Ricci wants to take this fight, where she wants to take her fights to have success. But, I talked about it a little bit earlier with Vienna. When you pull all those arm bars off, it does mean you spend time on your back. It means you give up time on the mat. It means a lot of times you give up cage control on the fence. And that's really been an issue for you. You saw Mallory Martin and Emily Whitmire both take her down. And I think Ricci is probably going to be able to do the exact same thing. Now, the difference here is Ricci is a black belt, so I expect her to be safe on the mat. I expect her to mind her P's and Q's, to win some of these transitions, and probably just ride out, the time on top here as the fight progresses. I did jump on her at minus 145. I saw the grappling edge, and maybe you told me all the simps are going to come in on Pollyanna. I should have waited, and I think that's what's happening right now because I thought I was going to have Ricci as my underdog before we got to this episode, But I do like Ricci, and I think it's probably going to hit the scorecards despite Pollyanna having all these finishes. I do think she's going to lose a decision here. I told you it reminds me of my play on Tracy Cortez versus Melissa Gatto a couple weeks ago. Big wrestling edge for one girl, but she is going to have to mind her P's and Q's in the girl's guard because if she doesn't, Pollyanna's going to be throwing up triangles. She's going to be throwing up arm bars, and Ricci might have to defend one of those throughout this fight, and I think that's something that we're going to see, but I think she stays safe, and I think she rides out minutes, wins a 15-minute decision here.
For my best bet of the night, I'm going to be going with a fight doesn't go the distance in the Omar Morales versus Uros Medic fight. These guys don't know anything but move forward, and I do think that Medic is more live than Morales to get the finish early, but as that fight progresses, I just have 100% confidence that Medic will give up after the second round, and this won't see the judges' scorecard. So, although I'm not necessarily, I love not having to pick a side here and just bet on violence, and getting it at minus 200. Fight doesn't go the distance. I think that you're looking at a really good price tag there.
I couldn't agree more, man. For one of the guys in that fight to never seen a 7-minute mark. Yeah, I'd be playing fight doesn't go the distance all day, especially when Omar's going to meet him in the middle,
And it almost reminds me of the Beverly Hills Ninja the other week where that fighter's not going to the judges' scorecards and you're getting a minus 200 or better fight doesn't go the distance. Yep. It's an auto bet.
Hit it. I agree with you, man. For my best bet, I'm going to go Felipe Colares. I took him at minus 152. I think he's sitting at like a minus 162, things like that now. But I'm down to fade Chase Hooper under minus 200, just about anybody. Chase Hooper, he is still a child amongst men in there, And for a while, Sean O'Malley was too, but Sean O'Malley's definitely gotten grown into his body and things, whether it's juicing or not. Maybe he needs to lend on Chase Hooper some advice because the dude he still shows up like a little string bean in there, And he's very, very one-dimensional. He has good jiu-jitsu, but he lacks any type of strength. He has no wrestling to get the fight down to the mat. I think he's rocking an 18% takedown accuracy. And then with Colares, man, he showed me an incredible gas tank. I know he can go a hard 15 minutes, grappling 15 minutes because he does it almost every fight. And then in those exchanges, I think he's going to be twice as strong as Chase Hooper, be able to win a lot of positions just off of his strength alone. It is a bit concerning that, where Felipe does have success, he's got to have to take it down where Chase Hooper stands a chance of winning a fight. But I trust his ability to stay safe. And if this fight becomes two grapplers who, stand and strike. Chase Hooper has little to no striking, man. He gets beat up on the feet like crazy, was absolutely getting pieced up by Peter Barrett until he found the Hail Mary sub in round 3. And, just like last week, I think I'm going to give out a best bet that's fucking sweaty, that's going to go 15 minutes. It's going to have a lot of grappling involved, but I do think Felipe Colares is superior to Chase Hooper, man.
Yeah, so I'm also on this bet with you, and I couldn't agree more, man. You're talking about Chase Hooper, who at 21 years old got his black belt in BJJ, and that's incredible, but I still think at 21 years old, no matter how much you've been doing it, you've still got some things to learn. So as far as the grappling, I'm not too worried about it, because you look at Felipe Colares, also a BJJ black belt, 7 more years of experience, and is also a BJJ or a judo black belt as well. So he's going to be able to dictate where the fight takes place if he does want to keep it or take it to the mat. I couldn't agree more, man. This is an auto bet, and I think it's a pretty safe one. Moving on to our quick pick section of the night, we start off the night with Elise Reed taking on Sam Hughes in the strawweight division. Like I said, Hughes is my underdog this week, and I'll be going with her.
Proper opening fight, unlike last week's card. You kind of talked me into Sam Hughes, though, and I like the grappling upside. So, yeah, give me Sam Page Hughes as my first underdog to kick off the night. Next fight, just talked about it, Chase Hooper versus Felipe Colares. I'm big on Felipe here. Probably takes the decision.
Next fight is in the bantamweight division with Jonathan Martinez and Vince Morales. I'll go with Jonathan Martinez, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Martinez, but he's on like our top 5 least favorite guys to back. He wins until he's just not winning anymore. Omar Morales, Uros Medic, we've touched on this one as well. I'm going to go Uros Medic, but better play would be doesn't go the distance.
Totally agree, and that is my second underdog pick of the night on Uros Medic. Moving on, we go to the heavyweight bout, maybe the people's main event this weekend against Parker Porter and Jailton Almeida. I want to pick Parker Porter so bad, but he's going to get absolutely mauled here, so I'm going to go with Almeida.
Yeah, Almeida, first round, head and arm choke. Joseph Holmes, Alan Emendowski. I wasn't joking, man. Alan Emendowski is going to knock this guy out. He's going to put him on the cage and land one of them big hooks, and Ugly Man's going to fall.
I want to agree with you, and I'm thankful that I'm not putting any money on this fight. I'm going to go with Joseph Holmes here, but I'd love to see Adamovski get a UFC win. Moving on, we go to the middleweight division where we see Eric Anders versus Jun Young Park. I'm actually big on the Iron Turtle. I hate that his line has been juiced up to minus 200 or more at this point, so I probably won't be playing it, but I do have Park here to get the job done.
I'm on Park as well. Just tell you why. Marc-Andre Barriault, John Phillips, Tafon, and Chukwi. Big middleweights, slow-moving middleweights. But, really don't have much but meat and potato striking, and he's taken them down and worked them, and I think that's what he's going to do here again as well. Polyana Viana versus Tabitha Ricci. Wish I would have waited. I could have got a much better line on Tabitha Ricci. I think she takes this one with her grappling by decision.
Polyana could be fighting Shevchenko, and I'm picking Polyana, all right? I've got her to win. Moving on, we've got Chidi Njokuani versus Dusko Todorovic. Yeah, although all the people on Chidi makes me want to lay super far away from this fight, I do think that he'll probably get the win here. And if it does take place on the feet, he could just style on Dusko.
Yeah, I took the words out of my mouth, man. We've lost a lot of value. It's starting to get mushy, but I think Chidi is going to get it done. Ponzinibbio and Michel Pereira. Man, like you said a couple years ago, I'm stabbing plus 100 Ponzinibbio all day long. At this point in time, I think Michel Pereira is on the uprise. If he takes everything serious, I think he's gonna win this one.
Yeah, part of the new wave. I also tend to lean Michel Pereira. And then in the main event, we have Holly Holmes versus Ketlen Vieira. 40-year-old Holly Holm. I guess I'm going with her, man.
I'm going Holly Holm as well. Decision. Outside of the age, I feel like if Holly Holm comes out here and just puts on an absolute clinic of a decision, it seemed like the easiest bet of the night, But
nobody's going to be surprised.
Exactly. But there are some red flags, and I understand the hesitancy of wanting to play her. But Holm's going to be my pick as well. 11 fights. Hopefully they all stay together, man. And we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.